I moved back into my parents' house the way people do when they promise it's temporary. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Just long enough to finish a stretch of work that required silence and reliable internet. My apartment was being renovated, and the company didn't care where I worked as long as the deadlines were met. The project lived almost entirely inside one laptop. Months of modeling, negotiations, and data streams layered into something that, if it worked, would change the trajectory of the startup I worked for. Investors had already started circling. My boss once joked that if everything went right, the valuation could hit $1 billion. My parents heard that part. They didn't really understand the rest. To them it was just my computer job. The first few days were fine. I sat up at the dining table with my laptop, a notebook, and a cup of coffee that kept getting cold while I worked. Then my sister started bringing her son over during the day. He was 4, loud in the way small children are loud without meaning to be. Plastic dinosaurs, toy trucks, a plastic sword that hit the walls with hollow clacks. Within an hour the floor around the table would look like a toy store had tipped over. I tried not to complain. I would just gather my things closer together, building a small island of workspace in the middle of the mess. My sister noticed once and laughed. "Relax," she said. "He's just playing." I nodded. My parents liked having the house full again. They watched him chase toy cars across the hallway while the TV murmured in the background. Sometimes my father would look at my screen and shake his head. "You've been staring at that thing for hours." "Working," I'd say. He would grin the way people do when they're politely skeptical. One afternoon my sister leaned over my shoulder and squinted at the code on my monitor. "So this is the $1 billion project." She said it jokingly, like the phrase itself was ridiculous. "Something like that," I said. She snorted. "Even if it is, so what? Kids don't owe your project anything. If he wants to scatter toys everywhere, that's life." My parents chuckled softly. I smiled the way people smile when they don't want to start a fight. Most of the time I worked with headphones in, not because I was listening to anything. Just because the quiet helped me focus. The day the laptop broke, I left the table for less than a minute. Coffee refill. When I walked back in, the first thing I heard was the sound. A hard plastic crack. Not loud. Just sharp enough to make every conversation stop. My nephew stood near the chair holding one corner of the laptop like it was a toy steering wheel. The rest of it was on the floor. The screen was open at an angle it had never been designed for. A thin web of fractures spread across the glass. For a second nobody said anything. Then my sister laughed nervously. "Oops." She took the computer from his hands and set it back on the table, like it might fix itself if we pretended nothing happened. I lifted the lid the rest of the way. The display flickered once, then died. My mother crossed her arms. "Well, why was it so close to the edge?" My father nodded toward the toys. "You know he runs around." My sister shrugged. "So what if your project is worth $1 billion? He's 4. Kids break stuff." The room kept moving. Someone turned the TV volume down. My nephew started pushing a truck across the floor again. The conversation drifted somewhere else. I sat there looking at the cracked screen. Months of work might still exist on the drive. Or it might not. I didn't know yet. But the room had already decided the important part wasn't the laptop. It was that I shouldn't make it awkward. I closed the lid. Then I stood up and walked out to the garage. The hammer was exactly where it always was, hanging from a hook beside the workbench. I held it for a moment. Not because I wanted to hit anyone. Just because I suddenly needed something in the house to feel real. When I walked back into the dining room, the reaction was immediate. My sister stood up. "Whoa. What are you doing?" My mother's voice sharpened. "Put that down." For the first time all day, everyone was paying attention. I didn't answer. I placed the broken laptop in the center of the table. Then I raised the hammer. And brought it down. The first strike shattered what was left of the screen. Glass cracked inward with a dry snap. My nephew froze. The room went completely silent except for my breathing. I lifted the hammer again. Another controlled hit. The keyboard caved inward. Plastic separated from aluminum. Each strike was deliberate. Measured. Not fast, not wild, just final. By the fourth hit my sister shouted, "Stop." I did. I set the hammer on the table beside the wreckage. No one moved. The laptop looked worse now, but strangely more honest. No illusion left that it could simply be brushed aside. I took my phone out. Called the company support line. They answered on the second ring. I said calmly, "I've had a hardware failure." My family listened as I explained. Yes, the device was destroyed. Yes, it contained the active build. Yes, the environment had backup layers, but the recovery might take time. They asked questions about security protocols and replacement procedures. I answered each one. By the time the call ended, the room felt different. My sister was staring at the pieces of the computer. My father rubbed the back of his neck. Nobody said it was my fault anymore. I packed what I could into my bag. The external drives, my notebook. The hammer stayed on the table. "I'll finish this somewhere else," I said. No one argued. When I stepped outside, the air felt quieter than the house had all week. Maybe the project could still be recovered. Maybe it couldn't. Either way, something had been clarified. Not through shouting, not through revenge, just through a moment where everyone in the room finally saw the same thing at the same time. Some things, once broken, don't belong in the same house anymore.